sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
Good morning and welcome to my new YouTube channel. The name is Bruce and the call sign G4ABX. And I thought before we get into reviews and operation and construction and all the rest of the hobby, I'll tell you a little bit about why amateur radio has interested me for so long. And it all started when I was probably pretty young, 6, 7, something like that. And whenever we used to go round to my grandparents' house in Birmingham, Grandad always had radio receivers. He always had radios, and some of them were quite complicated radios. And one I absolutely loved playing with, because that's pretty much all I did, was something called an AR88D, which was a huge box. I mean, we're talking huge. It probably weighed 30 or 40 pounds, something like that. Really heavy piece of kit. But every time I went, it was great tuning around the different bands, listening to different things. And then on my 8th birthday, when Nan and Grandad came round, he came with a present. It was the AR88D, which he brought to our house, and Dad and Grandad carried the thing upstairs. That was that was quite a sight. It completely filled my little desk in my bedroom, and I kept that radio for many, many years. In fact, I kept the radio until I left home. So an amazing piece of kit. But it was that radio that I really explored all of the shortwave listening activities and took me to become an licensed amateur radio operator. So myself, I was fortunate in that quite a few of my friends were also interested in radio, and secondary school was great fun, because we were always building things, building receivers, and in those days there was quite a lot of war surplus, Second World War surplus radio equipment available. There was a wonderful street in Hurst Street in Birmingham called Hurst Street. I'm still there. Although in those days it had 3 fabulous shops. It had something called the Radio Centre. Guess what they sold? It had Norman H. Fields and it had Matthews. And the Radio Centre was where you went to buy or pick up all your old war surplus bits and pieces, valves, whatever it was you wanted. Norman H. Field did very similar things, but were a bit more upmarket. And they had new amateur radio bits of kit as well. And Matthews was, if you had plenty of money, you went across the road to Matthews and bought the most modern stuff. There was another big radio shop in Corporation Street in Birmingham, but that was a rare venture. That was real state-of-the-art stuff, not something a schoolboy could afford with his pocket money. But a month's pocket money would buy you a great piece of second-hand or third-hand or even fourth-hand war surplus kit. And I bought all kinds of different bits and pieces, command set receivers, which were kind of aircraft receivers. They were quite small, quite compact. They were great fun. I remember buying an HRO receiver, which was another great big hulking thing. And but I think the biggest thing I ever came home on the bus with, much to my mom's dismay, was a 19 set. It took 2 of us to carry that, but nonetheless, great fun. And then from secondary school, I went to, my school didn't do A-levels, so I went to another school in Solihull and to sat my A-levels. And the physics master there, a lovely guy, a guy called Gil Cleaton, G4ABX, he was probably my main inspiration in terms of amateur radio. And he really supported us. He encouraged us. There was a bunch of us there. We had a radio club. Physics lessons could also be amateur radio operating sessions or building sessions or repairing sessions. I mean, it was just fantastic, really. And Gil lived in the same village that I lived in, south of Birmingham. And he was a great CW operator, a Morse code operator. And it was watching Gil that really convinced me that I ought to move from. By this time I'd got my Class B licence. In the UK we have two classes of licence, A and B. B licensees could only operate on VHF and above, so 144 megs and up in frequency. A licensees, of course, you get the whole spectrum to run on. But I was a B licence, G8 DJV, and Gil so inspired me and a bunch of my colleagues that we all went to Matthew Bolton College in Birmingham to learn CW, about an hour and a half, I think, on a Monday evening every week. And Dad used to drive me in. We got a car by those times, and that was how I learned CW. And then Dad drove me and my three mates down to a shore station, Burnham-on-Sea, outside Bristol, where we sat our Morse test, because it was generally, in those days, the Morse test was set by the GPO, the General Post Office in the UK. And it was accepted that if you went to a GPO building to sit your Morse test, it would be very stringently marked, where shore stations were perhaps a little less fearsome. So we went to the shore station primarily because you have to pass 12 words a minute in the UK to get your Class A licence. And I could probably manage 10. And my three mates at this shore station, Burnham-on-Sea, they sailed through their test, no problem at all. And I struggled. But the lovely guy who was examining us was determined clearly that I was going to pass. So he just kept sending me the groups of letters and numbers until I got enough to be a pass. And we all got our Class A licences sequentially. G4ABX obviously was mine. My mates got G4ABW, ABY. My other mate missed off the ABZ, and he got G4ACU. But we all passed and became Class A licensees. That enabled me to really do something that I'd wanted to do since I was very young. One of the first things I noticed with this big AR-88 that my granddad gave me was that at the bottom of one of the frequency bands, 160 metres it turned out to be, 1.8 to 2 megs, I could hear lots of locals talking. I knew they were locals because they had Birmingham accents. So it wasn't Voice of America or Voice of somewhere else, it was local. And it was fascinating to me as a child, as an inquisitive youngster, as I grew up. It was really interesting to hear what they were doing, and I'd always wanted to operate on top band. So the Class A licence gave me the opportunity. I started by building my first transmitter for 160 metres, amplitude modulation in those days for speech, and CW of course, and that was great fun. I was fortunate we had a huge aerial. In those days my parents lived on a kind of an elliptical housing estate. Although not very big houses, we had large gardens, and between my best mate and my house was about 500 foot across the diameter of this ellipse. And we strung a wire. We persuaded our dads to let us string a wire between the tops of our two houses. And we both used it. We both clipped on at either end to use it for receive antennas. Obviously, when I got my transmit license, we had to do something about that. Otherwise, the front end of his receiver would have gone up in smoke. So we agreed a protocol of who would operate, who would listen, when, how, etc., etc. But 160 metres, what was also interesting for me about 160 metres in the UK was you were only allowed to operate with 10 watts. QRP, well, maybe a bit more than the 5 watt QRP level, but 10 watts. And it fascinated me how far you could actually get using 10 watts on top band, on 160 metres. And how important propagation was, different times of the day, different times in the evening, early morning. And I managed to work across to America on Morse code on top band, primarily I think because the antenna was so good. It was so long. And that's what gave me that extra push. But that was it. Once I'd managed to do that, then the challenge for me was to work everywhere on 10 watts. So low power operation, which this channel is going to be all about, was started when I was really quite young and has been fascinating for me ever since. Even early field days in and around my home and university, etc. In those days, often the PA, the power amplifier stage, would be valve. It would be an 807, a very well-known valve. Again, war surplus, cheap, inexpensive. And for field days in those days, again, you could only run 10 watts. And I remember unplugging the 807 and plugging in a 2E26, which was a pin-for-pin replaceable valve, but would only enable you to run 10 watts. So 10 watts has become a bit of a yardstick for me, a bit of a baseline. And 10 watts operation is really just fantastic fun. So this channel is going to be all about low power operation. Portable is the other thing that I find really interesting, and building simple wire antennas. All my antennas have been wire antennas, other than my 2-meter beam. I did have a nice big 2-meter beam when I was G8D JV, but not now. I have a tiny, small portable beam that I take with me when I operate portable, collapsible and backpackable. So the channel is going to be all about low power. It's going to be about portable operation. I'll try and cover all the bands that we're allowed to operate. I don't operate above 70 centimeters, so I've never been up above that in terms of frequency, although I have bought myself a kit, a 23 centimeter transverter kit, which one of these days I shall get round to building. So that's all I want to say for now. Thank you very much indeed for watching this video, and if you like what we're going to do, then please subscribe and give me a thumbs up, because that all helps apparently. So this is all very new to me, and it's therefore going to be new to you, because this is the first time I've done any of this. Thank you very much, and 73s for now. I hope you all have a really good day. Farewell.
We're sorry, the number you have dialed is not in service at this time.